Welcome, everyone, to another episode of CDI Live. My name is Felix Vargas. I am the CTO of Security for CDI. Behind me, you see OneCon 2023, which is the first ever SentinelOne conference, right? So SentinelOne has been in business since, for over 10 years with 11,000 customers, primarily in the endpoint space. And this year, they organized their first ever conference, which is being conducted out of the beautiful Boca Raton Hotel in Boca Raton, Florida. Very awesome weather here, great golf. I'm glad I'm not up north, although I couldn't play golf here with everything going on with the conference. So there was a great keynote, today. I'll actually give you a glimpse. I know you're joining to talk about cyber insurance, but we're actually going to get into some of the elements of OneCon and some of the announcements that we heard in the keynote. But before we do, I want to welcome our guest, Mark Finlayson, who is a solutions architect at CDI. Welcome. How are you, Mark?
Doing well, Felix. Wish I was in Florida with you.
Florida is great. Mark, before we get into the specifics of cyber insurance and even the OneCon announcements, can you give a little bit of background on your cybersecurity journey and how you got to us today?
Sure. Started my career as a young Marine, and I remember, I don't want to give the year, embarrass myself, but it was before there was the World Wide Web, and I was getting a transfer from one unit in California to a unit on the East Coast, and I'm standing there in front of a old green military computer, and I remember standing there and no one was talking. I'm like, what are we waiting for? And there was just this blinking cursor. And someone turned to me after about a minute and said, we're waiting for them to respond. And I'm like, Philadelphia? And that's when it hit me. And then I learned about the ARPANET. And from there, I was hooked. And that led to multiple degrees in graduate work and a 25-year career in operational technology leadership. And that's where some of my background with cyber insurance will come to play in this conversation. And then since that career has ended, I've been on the consulting side here at CDI for the past 4 years and just happy to help customers day in and day out.
I got to tell you, I've been at CDI for 2 years, and I've learned so much from Mark as it relates to risk management, security assessments. He's a great resource that we're very happy to have. Thank you for that intro, Mark. Before we get into the specifics, I do want to introduce CDI Live, or reintroduce CDI Live. We've had already one session where we discussed the SEC rulings on cybersecurity incidents with one of our VCSOs, Josh Moore. This session is going to be on cyber insurance, and what we're planning on doing is having these sessions bi-weekly, right? So on Wednesdays, right? So part of the reason around these sessions are to sort of discuss trending topics and sort of address challenges that we're seeing in the cybersecurity landscape as well as beyond, right? So this is comprehensive to the entire portfolio of services that TDI has to offer, but it's a great way to sort of engage with customers as well as just with the community as a whole, right? So thank you for joining. Also, please subscribe to the CDI's LinkedIn or follow to us on LinkedIn so that you're preview to the latest updates and when we're going to go live and what the different subjects are going to be. So with that, I'm going to get into some elements of the keynote. So Tomer Weingarten got up and just gave a phenomenal keynote. There were a few key areas that he was focusing on. Number one was cybersecurity skills gap, cost of a data breach, and generative AI. Those are the three themes of the conference, which is not much different than how we see the world, right? The skills gap is continuously growing, breaches as well, and how generative AI is helping us be more efficient from a cybersecurity perspective. So, it was interesting to sort of see Tomer double click on that. And he also talked about disinformation, which I thought was an interesting concept that we're sort of, all aware of, but looking at social engineering from the perspective of not just, stealing your password, but actually controlling what your thought process is and almost getting you to a point where you're brainwashed and you're a double agent within an organization. That's an evolved thought, but cyber criminals are sort of taking a different approach to how they're using social engineering to achieve their goals, right? And it's something that we see a lot in today's world where you have social media, publishing information or videos that you see that may not be true, and it's a big concern. But as far as big announcements, the number one announcement that I sort of made the biggest impression on me was a Singularity Unity announcement, where SentinelOne is bringing together Operations Center, Data Lake, Cloud Security, Endpoint, and Ranger suites, as well as Purple AI under one umbrella. And then also the conversation around Purple AI and that beta expansion. So Purple AI, has been in beta, and they've just expanded the beta. I actually saw them post a link on LinkedIn where you can actually request access to the beta. And for those that don't know, Purple AI is an AI platform that SentinelOne is evolving and innovating, and it's very focused on facilitating the job of a security analyst is one side, and more sort of from the reactive perspective, but also helping from a proactive perspective. I saw a lot of cool things around automated investigations, which can really help curb that cybersecurity skills gap that we're seeing. And with that, let's get into cyber insurance. Just a bit of a glimpse into the conference, and the conference is still going. As you see, people are sort of buzzing back and forth in the background. I'm actually behind the registration desk currently. I actually walked around for 30 minutes to find a place that was quiet enough for us to conduct this. So hopefully the tech serves us well, and we're able to do this without hiccup. So let's jump right into it. So, Mark, you've had quite a lot of experience in cyber insurance, right? In fact, that's an area that you and I have collaborated on quite a bit. So can you explain what cyber insurance is and how it differs from traditional forms of business insurance?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And interestingly enough, I'd say before 2010, they kind of were the same document. There wasn't an additional breakout. There was the normal organizational insurance, and then there were a few cyber questions. CFO would ask the CIO, hey, do we have firewalls? Do we have antivirus? Do we use least privilege? Do we do pen tests once a year? That kind of thing, the basics. Everything kind of changed around 2010 with cryptocurrency giving threat actors an easy way to exfiltrate and then charge a ransom or make you pay for exfiltrating of data. And that's when we started to see more things come in. So that's when they kind of broke apart. Most organizations broke them apart as your general insurance for bodily injury, damage to the physical plant, things of that nature, and the cyber insurance to protect against cyber damages, malware events, ransomware, those kind of things that we think of in the headlines all the time.
So we started with maybe privacy and brand protection, and we sort of, today's climate, we have sophisticated attacks. The number of attacks have increased exponentially. So the cyber insurance providers have to shift that model to remain viable, right? It's interesting. You have, and I talk about this all the time. When the hurricane hits Florida, the premiums, increase,
Right.
and from a home insurance perspective, and the business model is still very similar to traditional insurance, right? It's not just it's not a new business model just because we're dealing with cyber.
Exactly. Yeah. I had an interesting conversation about a year ago with a CEO of an insurance brokerage firm. So he has his finger on the pulse, and he's been in the business for over 15 years. And what he said was cyber insurance used to be a cash cow. People didn't claim on it. They would put it in there, but not many things were happening until 2013, 14, 15. Think Target, Home Depot, those kind of breaches that happened then, and they had to start paying out. And insurance is a business. They are making a calculated risk and a bet that that the client is not going to have a payout. Same thing like your car insurance or your home insurance. So they're trying to make a profit. And with all of the attacks that had started happening, they had to start paying out more and more. Their margins started going down. That's when they started asking for more controls to be in place, more proof, and that's when the rates started going up.
So let's talk about those controls, right? So if I'm getting car insurance, I need anti-lock brakes, right? I need to make sure that I have, proper assessment conducted on the car, make sure it's working well. What controls, what are the fundamental tools and assessments an organization must have to qualify for cyber insurance, number one, and at a reasonable premium?
And that last part's a good part. There are a lot of insurance carriers out there. They ask different things, but in general, they tend to ask for the same things. CDI has thousands of clients. We hear our clients say, hey, we need to meet our cyber insurance, and they share their forms with us, and we can see it's the same thing again and again. So first of all, the basics, do you have a firewall? Do you have antivirus? Used to be the question. Now it's, do you have next gen antivirus, or EDR is the real big one since 2020. Do you have an asset management system? You can't protect what you don't know is there. And cutting down on that shadow IT. How is change happening? How is your risk being assessed? Is it being done in a cadence? And then when tools start to come in, we're talking about things like DLP, data loss protection, DSPM, your managed detection and response as well. And the cyber insurance firms are trying to get a sense for, do you have all your ducks in a row? If you don't, we're going to need to raise your premium because you're not as good of a bet. Or you just might not be insurable. And we run into that sometimes where clients say, we can't get cyber insurance. We were breached. We didn't have things in place. So there's a long list of things that need to be done, but a lot of times it's the basics too, like vulnerability management. How do you patch, and on what cadence? Right. Can you prove that? Go ahead, Felix, please.
Proving that is interesting, right? It's because one thing is asking and having a questionnaire that says, hey, do you have EDR? Do you have MFA? Do you have 24/7 monitoring? Do you have asset management? Right. And the other piece is, how can a cyber insurance provider go in and actually verify this? Right. So what are you seeing in that space beyond the questionnaire, and actually what is real?
So gone are the good old days. I remember you check the boxes, you sign your name to it. Life was great. Right. And then the boxes got longer, and you had to fill out more information, and you had to attest to it. And now you're kind of on the hook if you're in a C-level position. And nowadays what's happening is it's really more like a type 2 audit compared to a type 1 audit. Type 1 audit, you can tell a good story, check the boxes, the auditors will go away. Type 2, they want proof. And that's what the cyber insurance companies are doing now. It's not good enough to say that you have an MDR in place or SOC as a service or something like that. Who are you using? What is your relationship? What are their SLAs and response times? How can you show how you recovered from an incident quickly? So they want to see more. They really are making an investment in you, and they want to know they're making a really good investment, and they're trying to size up their risk in insuring the organization.
That makes sense. So let's talk about adversary profile. So we have nation state actors, that are motivated, by advancing the goals of the nations that they represent. We have hacktivists, right, that are after sort of a meaningful cause, from their perspective, and we also have cyber criminals. So we're by and large seeing an increase as far as cyber criminals being the lead adversary. But how is that landscape from an emerging threats perspective affecting or impacting the cyber insurance market as a whole?
Yes. So, we've all seen probably the graphics of the hockey stick curve of what happened around 2015, 16, 17, 18 with ransomware taking off. And that goes back to the fact that insurance companies were starting to lose more and more money. And then, of course, COVID hit. Our people are everywhere. CIOs and CISOs are panicking all over the place. And insurance carriers are wanting proof that you are able, as an organization, to control your data. That your data is not out there in the wind, and how do you do that? And again, they want proof. Do you have the right tools in place? Can you demonstrate how you could handle something like that? They're going to want to see tabletop exercises too. And I should have mentioned that earlier. They're going to want to see a really well written out disaster recovery plan, business continuity plan, incident response plan, business impact assessment, and are these tested with tabletop assessments and quarterly reviews on an ongoing basis, not just a paper trophy that's created and put it on a shelf, but something that's actually a living document that you can respond to quickly when an event happens.
Got it. So we have a good understanding of, what cyber insurance is now, right? How cyber insurance providers classify risk, profile organizations from a risk perspective. What effect does that have on the premium itself and the coverage amounts, right? So what coverage amounts should customers be targeting?
It's a great question. And that's a one size fits one. It's a business decision. It's usually handled at like a cabinet level of when you do that risk assessment and you have a risk register, your residual risk, and you have to decide, are you going to transfer that? Are you going to accept it? How are you going to offload it? One of the ways you do that is with cyber insurance. The organization makes a very clear, or should make a very clear prediction of if this happens, how far will that impact us and what do we need to cover? That includes brand. That includes, let's say you're in the manufacturing industry and you're down for 3 days. That is very expensive if things are not coming off the line. That also includes extortion. They have your data. Once your data is out there, it's usually the double extortion. They want you to pay it back. And then they also, if you don't pay, they're going to start dripping it out there. And we've all seen the stories where they start putting it out there, not only on the dark web, but on the regular internet to put pain on you and pressure to get you to pay. Right. So last year, Los Angeles over Labor Day weekend, of course, it was a Friday on a holiday weekend, second largest school district in the world, in the United States. And when they weren't paying, they started dripping out personal information from teachers and students and telling parents, this school district isn't paying, and we're going to start putting your information out there if the district doesn't pay.
That's awful. They always wait till the holidays or when, it's Christmas time. That's what we've seen, right? It's, right when you're distracted, frying a turkey or buying presents that, things like this happen. So that makes sense. So what does it look like from, for cyber insurance from an exclusions perspective, right? So we talked about the threat landscape largely evolving. How is that affecting exclusions? And Mark always comes up, and you and I have talked about this offline. Can you sort of elaborate on that story and sort of relate exclusions to coverage for us?
Yes. So you have known vulnerabilities. Let's say you know about things, but you didn't take care of them. That could be an exclusion, a clause written in where it's lack of due diligence. You could have insider threat. You didn't train your people well, or you didn't have a good insider threat policy. There may be a clause in there for that. Also, failure to maintain security. Maybe at the time that you got the insurance, you had all the right tools in place, EDR, MDR, mutable air gap backups, et cetera. And then you stopped because you wanted to cost cut. Well, you are not really adhering to at the moment that you signed that insurance and said that you were going to carry those controls through. The big one that most people know, though, is the war times clause. Right. And we've talked about it before with Merck is the big example people like to point to. In June of 2017, when NotPetya hit, Russia hit Ukraine. Merck had seats in Ukraine, and then 80% of Merck United States ended up getting locked up. It was a $1.4 billion insurance claim, and it was in court for 7 years. Went through the appeal process, and Merck just this past May, 7 years later, finally won, and now the insurance carrier is going to have to pay. But they were leaning on that war times clause that Russia attacked Ukraine, and Merck just got caught up in the wash.
Wow, that's very interesting. So it's important to pay close attention to these exclusions because they could put you in a position where you're not covered at all, right? And so that's educating ourselves on that is critical. So let's shift topics a little bit. So cyber insurance from a incident perspective. So in my background, right, I got into cybersecurity because we had an outage of a hospital actually. Right. And what was very apparent to me being in the trenches was that cyber insurance, their agenda was very different than the agenda of, incident response and recovery. Right. And so there was a sort of an issue as far as how are we going to make or bring back these tier one applications and making sure that the business is functioning versus, are we restarting a server and maybe removing, logs and affecting the forensics process, right? Where cyber insurance comes in, right? So what are your thoughts on that? What are the differences between cyber insurance and incident response retainers, and how do they complement each other when a cybersecurity incident occurs?
Felix, you nailed it right there. They should complement each other. If done well by the executives of an organization, they've complemented each other. They do two different things. You know, you can think of it as your home. The cyber insurance will pay if your home burns down or is on fire. The cyber insurance is going to pay for your home. They will do an investigation, making sure they're paying the fair value that they should pay because they insured you. But they're not coming with the fire trucks and the hoses, and they're not going to come then the day after like ServPro and start cleaning things up. So the fire trucks and ServPro, that's the incident response folks in this analogy, and the insurance company is the one who's ultimately going to pay once you put in a claim. All of this should be worked out in advance. This is not something where you start shopping for incident response companies in the middle of a firefight where you're getting ransomware at 2 a.m. on a holiday weekend.
Right.
Parties should know each other, and the big four that should collectively be on the same team are your cyber insurance company, your incident response company, your legal counsel, and your executive team that's responsible for the different actions that are laid out in your business continuity and disaster recovery plan. Not only the IT folks, but the senior executive who is handling PR. We don't just want anyone out there talking on behalf of the company. There should be a designated person and a backup and those kind of things.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And just, public services announcement, if you don't have an incident response retainer, please get one. It's very important, and it greatly facilitates, that process. So let's talk about compliance a bit, right? So we've had regulations like GDPR, CCPA, imposing strict requirements and penalties for data breaches. How does cyber insurance help companies in maintaining compliance?
The first thing is it forces them to actually do what they need to do to protect themselves. Because a lot of times you talk to clients, they don't really want to spend the money to put the security controls in place. They might tell you, hey, I've been in business for 20 years. I haven't needed this up until this point. I really don't want to do it. If they've learned then, hey, you can't play in Europe if you're not going to follow their rules. Felix, I do a lot of work in the defense industrial base. And with CMMC that's been coming in, that same kind of thing. If you're not willing to put the certain controls in place and make sure that you can prove that you have the policies, procedures, and people, you're not going to be able to keep taking on those federal contracts. So that is the first piece. And then from there, let's just go back to the GDPR or the CCPA with the California law, and you've done all your due diligence, you have been insured, you've done all the right things, and then you do have an event. They can help make you whole. They can help stand you back up. They can help you with PR, like we previously discussed, and things like that.
That makes sense. And let's talk a bit about trends and predictions. We've talked a bit about this already, right? The scrutiny change from a cyber insurance perspective, the threat landscape changing quite a bit. What do you see happening from a cyber insurance industry perspective going into the future? How will these evolve?
Yeah, and this goes back to having conversations with executives in the last couple of weeks to prepare for this, to get their opinion where they see things going. And what I kept hearing, the same message was, a lot of controls have been required since 2010, and it keeps increasing. Mm-hmm. They then have said since 2020 and 2021, it was just like a year where all of a sudden we had to have many things in place because the world had changed. And that 2-year period was almost equal to the 10-year period previously.
Right.
We're past that now. And that was even in the executive order. Everybody knew you had to have EDR, immutable air gap backup, security awareness training, MFA. I mean, when my mother and father know what MFA is, you get scale. And at the same time, because everything going to the cloud, we have DLP, data loss security prevention, and PAM, privileged access management, have been very big in the last few years that we're seeing on insurance again and again. The change, to answer your question, is they are now ratcheting down. They don't just want to know that you check the box for PAM, but let's just use PAM as an example. How did you implement it? How wide did you implement it? What are the settings? Do you have policies and procedures around that? Do your people know how to actually use that? And where you don't have PAM, can you justify why you didn't put that in there? Again, PAM, privileged access management, just as an example. MFA, same thing. They want to know where you put it, how it's configured, do you know how to use it? And if it's not someplace, why didn't you put it on something like service accounts?
Right,
just as
right.
an example.
Which we see often, right? So that makes a lot of sense. And actually, a question just came in around MFA, right? And should I use token-based versus text message-based MFA, right? And I think this is, the MGM Grand hack came from a SIM swap to some sort, right? And so, what are we doing, in this market, and what is your recommendation as far as token versus text MFA?
Yeah, that's a great question. And MGM Grand definitely got everyone's attention. That's where we, in an organization like ourselves, we come in and we don't just provide one kind of MFA. If we stick to that example, we provide an entire spectrum. And we listen very carefully to the client for the business case uses as well as their technology needs. Because sometimes it might be a wonderful tool, but it doesn't fit their use case. Again, going back to the defense industrial base, sometimes they can't use a best in breed product because of a certain reason. So really, we listen carefully to what their needs are and what's the best fit for them.
Right. That makes sense. You sort of segued a little bit into, our services. So how can CDI help, right? When we're talking about cyber insurance, how can we help customers gain insurance, remain insured, and be covered at the right premium?
Right. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about my position. Having come from there, I signed that form for years, but pretty much anything you're going to find on that cyber insurance policy, the ask from the insurance company to the client, we here at CDI do this every day. This is our bread and butter, from all the technical controls that we just discussed in the previous questions, as well as we can help you with your annual third-party penetration test. That's been on the cyber insurance forms for over 15 years. Your annual third-party vulnerability assessment. We can do a gap assessment for you, a risk assessment, and build you out a risk register. Again, help you with the disaster recovery plan, the business continuity plan, and the BIA, the business impact assessment. I know it's a lot of letters, but it all kind of falls under our consulting services, our VCSO services, and we can come alongside of you, listen carefully to what's being asked from your insurance carriers and help make sense of it, and then help you strategically move forward. And then when you want to purchase something like you just talked about MFA, we can come in and help you decide on what makes the most sense for you, not CDI, but for you, the client.
Right. So that's a great answer, right? So we have an advisory, security advisory services organization, right? Where we're providing security consulting across all the different assessments that can be conducted that you just named, right? And then we have a strategic arm, which is security consultant / VCSO, that helps sort of orchestrate those assessments to make sure that we have a full understanding of the gaps and also a roadmap. And then we can sort of even help executing on that roadmap when you go to deploy the tool, when it comes to tool selection, and even go as far as integrating the tools to achieve the outcome. So reach out if you all need assistance with any of what we've discussed today. I want to thank you, Mark, for your time. Really appreciate you going through this with us. Great insights. Hopefully, customers and the overall cybersecurity community got value from this. Thanks for all the listeners for joining. Also, be sure to follow CDI on LinkedIn or subscribe to YouTube to get the most up-to-date information. Like I said, we'll be conducting these bi-weekly on Wednesdays, just building a community and sharing information across all of the value that CDI has to offer. Thank you so much. I'm going to get back to the conference, and I'm very happy that we didn't have any technical glitches. Hopefully my audio is clear, but I appreciate everyone joining. Thank you.